You ever watched a CEO who thought he was untouchable? He shredded my promotion letter in front of the entire office, smiling like his power was absolute. But he didn't know one thing. The real power was in my hands. And with just one signature, I'd make his company lose $74 million in a single day. This isn't just a revenge story. This is a lesson about never underestimating a woman who understands the system better than you do. My name is Rachel Morgan, and I've spent 12 years building my fortress of federal compliance at Helixson Dynamics. At 42, I knew every regulation, every loophole, every signature that kept our biotech empire running. I wasn't just another middle manager pushing papers in our Denver headquarters. I was the gatekeeper between a $9 billion corporation and federal prison. Then Ethan Cole walked through our glass doors. 31 years old, Harvard MBA still fresh on his wall, designer suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Our new CFO arrived with a mandate to streamline operations and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. I'd seen his type before, young executives who confused disruption with destruction, who thought experience was something you could download from a McKinsey presentation. The first all-hands meeting set the tone. Ethan stood at the podium, clicking through slides filled with meaningless jargon. Agile compliance ecosystem, operational synergy, lean methodology integration. Behind me, I heard the younger employees whispering excitedly about fresh perspectives and innovation. They didn't understand that in federal compliance, innovation was just another word for indictment. Now let's talk about legacy systems, Ethan said, his laser pointer landing on an org chart. My department sat there like a tumor he was eager to excise. Some of you represent what I call legacy overhead, processes and positions that haven't evolved with the times. His eyes found mine across the conference room. The pause was deliberate, theatrical. A few heads turned my way. Sarah from accounting shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Marcus from legal loosened his tie. Rachel, Ethan continued, still maintaining eye contact, your department is a perfect example. 47 different federal licenses managed by one person? That's not efficient. That's a bottleneck. I didn't flinch, didn't argue. I simply opened my laptop and began typing. Not notes from his presentation. I was backing up every critical file, every license number, every federal contact onto my personal encrypted drive. Let him talk about efficiency. I was preparing for war. The meeting dragged on for 2 hours. Ethan outlined his transformation roadmap with the enthusiasm of someone who'd never faced a federal audit. He spoke about reducing redundancies, about modernizing our approach, about bringing Helixson into the 21st century. What he didn't speak about were the 47 federal licenses that required annual renewals, quarterly reports, and constant monitoring. Licenses that had my name on them. Not Helixson's name, mine. After the meeting, I walked back to my office, a modest space on the 4th floor with a view of the parking garage. No corner office for the compliance chief. That real estate was reserved for people like Ethan, people who generated revenue instead of preventing catastrophe. My assistant, Janet, followed me in. That was rough, she said, closing the door behind her. Was it? I asked, still typing. He basically called you obsolete in front of everyone. I smiled, fingers never leaving the keyboard. Janet, do you know what happens when you remove a cornerstone because you think it's just another brick? She shook her head. The whole building comes down. That night, I stayed until 11:30, systematically copying every file, every certification, every federal correspondence from the past 5 years. Our IT department would have been horrified if they knew about my shadow admin access, a little back door I'd maintained since the system migration 3 years ago. But then again, it reported to finance now, to Ethan. As I packed up my things, I noticed the lights still on in the executive suite. Through the glass, I could see Ethan at his desk, surrounded by consultants half his age, redesigning my department on a whiteboard. They were laughing, drawing boxes and arrows, playing God with people's livelihoods. I thought about walking over, introducing myself properly, explaining why federal compliance couldn't be disrupted like a taxi service or a hotel chain. But then I remembered the way he'd said, legacy overhead, like I was outdated software he couldn't wait to uninstall. No, let him play his games. Let him think he was the smartest person in the room. Because I knew something Ethan Cole didn't know. In the world of federal compliance, the person who holds the licenses holds the power. And every single one of those 47 licenses had my signature on it. The war had begun. He just didn't know it yet. The promotion letter had been sitting in my desk drawer for 3 weeks, signed by our former CEO, David Kruger, 2 days before his retirement, Director of Compliance Strategy, a role that would have finally given me a seat at the executive table, a voice in the decisions that shaped our future. David understood what I brought to Helixon. Ethan was about to demonstrate that he didn't. The Friday morning meeting was supposed to be routine, quarterly compliance review, nothing special. I arrived at 8:45 sharp, my presentation loaded, my reports printed and bound. The conference room was already full, unusual for a compliance meeting. Ethan sat at the head of the table, my promotion letter in his hands. Rachel, he said, gesturing to the only empty chair. Please, sit. We were just discussing organizational efficiency. The room felt smaller than usual. I recognized the faces, department heads, senior managers, even some junior staff who had no business being in a compliance review. This wasn't a meeting. It was a show. Before we begin, Ethan continued, holding up the letter, I wanted to address some outdated business from the previous administration. My stomach tightened, but I kept my expression neutral. 23 years in corporate America teaches you to never show blood in the water. This, he said, waving the paper like evidence in a trial, is exactly the kind of thinking that's been holding Helixon back, creating new executive positions for the sake of corporate bloat. Director of Compliance Strategy? He laughed, a sharp sound that cut through the silence. What's next? Senior Vice President of Paperclips? A few nervous chuckles rippled through the room. I noticed Sarah from accounting wasn't laughing. Neither was Marcus from legal. They knew what that letter meant. They knew what I'd earned. Ethan stood up, still holding my promotion letter. This is what I think of redundant positions and legacy thinking. The sound of tearing paper filled the conference room. Once, twice, 3 times. He didn't just rip it in half. He shredded it methodically, letting the pieces fall onto the conference table like snow. Each tear was deliberate, calculated for maximum impact. We're not in the business of creating unnecessary hierarchy, he said, brushing the paper fragments off his hands. We're in the business of efficiency, of results, of moving forward, not backward. The room was completely silent. I could hear the HVAC system humming, someone's phone vibrating on silent mode, my own heartbeat steady in my chest. Everyone was watching me, waiting for the explosion, the tears, the resignation speech. I gave them none of it. Instead, I opened my portfolio and pulled out my compliance report. Shall we proceed with the quarterly review? We have 47 federal licenses up for renewal in the next 90 days. Ethan blinked, clearly thrown by my lack of reaction. Yes, of course. For the next hour, I presented my report with the same professionalism I'd shown for 12 years. License status updates, regulatory changes, risk assessments. My voice never wavered, my hands never shook. But underneath the table, I was texting Janet on my personal phone. Pull the Section 12B file, make copies, notarize them, today. When the meeting ended, I gathered the torn pieces of my promotion letter from the table, placing them carefully in my portfolio. Ethan watched me, confused. Souvenir? He asked, that smirk returning. Evidence, I replied, meeting his eyes for the first time since he'd destroyed my future. You'd be surprised how important paper trails are in my line of work. Back in my office, I locked the door and finally allowed myself 30 seconds of rage. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to march back to that conference room and explain to that arrogant child exactly what he'd just done. But rage was a luxury I couldn't afford. Not yet. Janet knocked twice, our signal, and entered with a folder. Section 12B. As requested. I've never seen anyone actually invoke this clause. I smiled, signing my name across the bottom of the document. That's because nobody's ever been stupid enough to make it necessary. Section 12B was my insurance policy, buried deep in my employment contract from 12 years ago, a clause that tied my employment status directly to the federal licenses I managed. If I was terminated without cause, every license under my name would automatically expire within 48 hours. It was designed to protect the company from vindictive employees. Instead, it was about to protect me from a vindictive employer. File this with legal, I told Janet, and make sure you get a receipt, time-stamped. She hesitated at the door. Rachel, are you sure about this? I looked at the torn pieces of my promotion letter, now sealed in a clear evidence bag on my desk. He wanted to make an example of me. Janet, he succeeded, just not the way he intended. That night, I updated my LinkedIn profile. Not to job hunt, that would come later. I simply added a new skill to my repertoire. Strategic compliance architecture. Ethan Cole thought he'd humiliated me. He thought he'd won, but he'd made the classic mistake of every overconfident executive I'd ever met. He'd assumed the person he was destroying was powerless. In 72 hours, he'd learn exactly how wrong he was. Monday morning arrived with fanfare. Ethan had branded it Realignment Week, complete with branded coffee mugs and motivational posters featuring soaring eagles and meaningless corporate quotes. The entire company was buzzing with nervous energy. After 12 years at Helixson, I was about to interview for my own job. The email had arrived Sunday night at 11:17. All employees would undergo position optimization interviews to ensure they were properly aligned with Helixson's future vision. The younger staff saw it as an opportunity. The veterans saw it for what it was, a purge. I arrived at 7:30, an hour before my scheduled interview. The office felt different. Desks had been rearranged into collaborative pods. Walls had been painted in what Ethan called innovation colors, and screens everywhere displayed real-time productivity metrics. It looked like a tech startup had swallowed a biotech company and was still digesting. "Rachel!" a voice called out. Tyler Morrison, fresh out of Stanford, bounced over with the enthusiasm of someone who'd never been laid off. "Isn't this exciting? Ethan says we're finally joining the 21st century. We manufacture medical devices that go inside human bodies. Tyler, some of us were hoping to skip directly to the 22nd. His smile faltered, but only for a moment. That's exactly the kind of thinking Ethan wants to eliminate. He says we need to embrace disruption. I wanted to tell Tyler that in medical devices, disruption meant dead patients and billion-dollar lawsuits. Instead, I smiled and headed to my office, or what was left of it. My nameplate was gone. My certificates had been removed from the walls. 14 boxes sat stacked by my desk with a note. Please categorize all materials as essential, redundant, or obsolete by end of day. Janet stood in the doorway, her face pale. They did this to everyone over 40. It's like they're erasing us. Not erasing, I corrected, starting on the first box. Rewriting. There's a difference. My interview was scheduled for 9:15 in what used to be the boardroom, now renamed the Innovation Hub. 3 people sat across from me. Ethan, of course, flanked by 2 consultants who looked like they'd been ordered from the same catalog. Matching haircuts, matching suits, matching tablets where they typed matching notes. "Rachel," Ethan began, not bothering with pleasantries, "tell us why Helixson needs a dedicated compliance department in the age of automated regulation management." It was a trap question. Say the department was essential, and I'd sound like a dinosaur protecting her territory. Say it wasn't, and I'd be arguing myself out of a job. "Helixson doesn't need a compliance department," I said, watching surprise flicker across their faces. "It needs compliance integration at every level. The question is whether you want that integration managed by someone who understands both the regulations and the technology, or by an algorithm that can't tell the difference between a clerical error and a federal violation." Consultant 1 typed furiously. Consultant 2 frowned at his screen. Ethan leaned back, studying me. Interesting perspective. And what would you say to the assertion that your role has become, shall we say, too comfortable? Too set in its ways? I'd say comfort is the enemy of vigilance, which is why I update our compliance protocols every quarter, attend federal workshops every month, and maintain active relationships with 17 different regulatory bodies. But you already knew that. It was in the report I submitted last week, page 43, if you're looking for specifics. The interview continued for another hour. They asked about modernization, about efficiency, about my vision for the future. I gave them exactly what they wanted to hear. Buzzwords wrapped around enough technical detail to remind them that compliance wasn't something you could learn from a weekend seminar. When it ended, Ethan stood and offered his hand. Thank you for your time, Rachel. We'll be in touch about your new role. New role? His smile was all teeth. Inventory Management Specialist. We feel your attention to detail would be better utilized in our warehouse operations. Same pay. Of course, we're not monsters. From Chief of Federal Compliance to counting boxes in a warehouse, the humiliation was intentional, designed to make me quit, save them the severance, avoid the unemployment claims. It was clever. It was cruel. It was exactly what I'd expected. When do I start? I asked, my voice steady. He blinked, caught off guard again. You're accepting? Why wouldn't I? Helixson has been my home for 12 years. I'm not about to abandon it now. Back in my office, I made 2 phone calls. The first was to my lawyer, confirming that Section 12B was fully activated and properly filed. The second was to my husband, telling him we'd be eating out tonight. I had work to do. As 5 o'clock approached, I submitted my box categorizations, everything labeled essential. Then I logged into the shadow admin panel, the one Ethan's consultants hadn't found in their security audit. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. One command would revoke admin access for every employee hired in the last 6 months. Another would lock them out of the federal database entirely. Not yet. The timing had to be perfect. I looked around my soon-to-be former office, at the pale rectangles on the walls where my certifications had hung, at the boxes of 12 years' worth of relationship building and expertise marked for storage. Then I looked at my computer screen, at the 47 federal licenses that still bore my name, at the power Ethan thought he'd stripped away. Inventory Management Specialist, I said to myself, almost laughing at the absurdity. Let him think he'd won. Let him believe I was broken, humiliated, defeated, because while Ethan Cole was playing checkers, I was playing chess, and I was about to put him in check. The warehouse was a 40-minute drive from the main campus, a deliberate exile designed to break my spirit. For 2 weeks, I counted inventory, checked shipment logs, and wore a yellow safety vest that screamed "Fallen from Grace." But every lunch break, I sat in my car with my laptop, monitoring something far more important than boxes of medical supplies. The 47 federal licenses were time bombs, each with its own detonation date, FDA certifications, EPA permits, DEA registrations for controlled substances used in our pain management devices, a constellation of approvals that kept Helixson operational. And every single one required my personal authorization for renewal or modification. Ethan had made one critical error in his rush to humiliate me. He'd never actually reviewed my employment contract. If he had, he would have found Section 12B buried on page 37 of the appendices. It was a relic from the company's startup days, when they couldn't afford to lose the one person who understood federal compliance. The clause was simple. If I was terminated without cause, all licenses registered under my name would automatically lapse after 48 hours, unless personally renewed by me. My lawyer had been skeptical when I'd invoked it. Rachel, this clause is 12 years old. They could challenge it. Let them, I'd replied. By the time their legal team figures out how to challenge it, they'll have bigger problems. Wednesday afternoon at 3:22. I got the email I'd been expecting. Not from Ethan. He was too smart to leave digital fingerprints. It came from HR, clinical and cold. Dear Ms. Morgan, We regret to inform you that your position has been eliminated as part of our organizational restructuring. Your employment with Helix and Dynamics will terminate effective Friday at 5 p.m. Please return all company property. I read it twice, then forwarded it to my personal email and my lawyer. The 48-hour countdown would begin Friday at 5:01. By Sunday night, Helixon would be operating illegally. By Monday morning, they'd know it. I spent Thursday cleaning out my warehouse locker, making small talk with the shipping crew who'd been surprisingly kind to the executive who'd been knocked down to their level. They didn't know I'd been documenting every safety violation, every corner cut in the name of Ethan's efficiency. You see things differently from the bottom of the corporate ladder. Friday arrived gray and drizzling. I turned in my badge at 4:30, signed my termination papers at 4:45, and walked to my car at 4:55. At exactly 5:01, I sat in the parking lot and activated the automated notification system I'd set up 2 weeks earlier. 47 emails went out simultaneously to 47 different federal agencies, each one identical. Please be advised that Rachel Morgan is no longer employed by Helixon Dynamics effective today. All licenses and certifications under her authority will expire in 48 hours per contractual obligations. Renewal requests should be directed to Helixon's Chief Financial Officer, Ethan Cole. Then I drove home, poured myself a generous glass of Malbec, and waited. Saturday passed quietly. I imagine Ethan spent it celebrating his successful restructuring, maybe golf with the consultants, definitely champagne with the board members who'd backed his vision. The emails from federal agencies would be sitting in Helixon's general inbox, unread until Monday. Government bureaucracy had its advantages. Sunday at 5:01 p.m., the first license expired. FDA certification for our flagship insulin pump controller. Without it, every unit shipped would be technically illegal. The dominoes were starting to fall. I spent Sunday evening at a spa, getting a manicure in a shade called Deep Crimson Victory. The nail technician asked if I had a special occasion. "You could say that," I replied, admiring how the color caught the light. "Tomorrow, someone learns that power isn't about the office you sit in or the title on your business card." She nodded like she understood, though she couldn't possibly. How could I explain that tomorrow morning Ethan Cole would walk into a crisis entirely of his own making? That every efficiency he'd implemented, every cost he'd cut, every person he'd humiliated would pale in comparison to operating without federal compliance? My phone buzzed. A text from Janet. "Legal is in panic mode. They're calling emergency meetings for 6 a.m. Monday. What did you do?" I typed back, exactly what my contract required. By my calculation, Helixon had about 14 hours before their biggest client called to verify their FDA certifications for a $74 million order. 14 hours before they discovered that their legacy overhead had been the only thing standing between them and catastrophe. I finished my wine, set my alarm for 8 a.m., and went to bed. Tomorrow promised to be educational for everyone involved. Ethan Cole thought he understood power because he could destroy careers and rearrange org charts. But real power? Real power was knowing that 47 pieces of paper with your signature were worth more than all his MBA theories combined. The great unraveling was about to begin, and I had a front row seat. Monday arrived like Christmas morning. I woke at 7:43, made coffee, and settled onto my couch with my laptop. The show was about to begin. 8:15. My phone rang. Janet, whispering, "Rachel, it's chaos. Absolute chaos. They've locked down the executive floor." "Why are you whispering?" "I'm in the supply closet. Security is escorting people out who don't have C-level clearance. Something about a federal compliance emergency." I sipped my coffee. "How interesting. Well, enjoy your day off." 9:07. The first domino fell publicly. I'd set up Google Alerts for Helixon Dynamics, and my phone lit up with a notification from MedTech Daily. Breaking: Helixon's FDA certification status under review. 9:32. My former colleague started texting. Sarah from accounting. "Did you know about this?" Marcus from legal. Please tell me you have copies of everything. Even Tyler, the Stanford kid. I think I understand what you meant about disruption now. I didn't respond to any of them. This wasn't about them. 10:10. The big one hit. I watched it happen in real time through Helixson's vendor portal, a backdoor access I'd maintained for exactly this moment. Cardinal Health, our largest client, had logged in to verify our certifications before processing their $74 million order for next-generation insulin pumps. The system returned exactly what I knew it would. Invalid license, certification expired. I pictured the purchasing manager's face, the frantic phone calls, the emergency escalation. Cardinal Health didn't mess around with compliance. One expired license meant immediate contract suspension. 47 expired licenses meant something else entirely. Complete vendor disqualification. 10:35. My phone rang. Unknown number. Denver area code. I let it go to voicemail. Then another, and another. By 10:45, I had 17 missed calls and a voicemail box approaching capacity. The first message was from someone in legal I'd never met. Ms. Morgan, this is Bradley from Helixson Legal. We need to discuss your recent termination and some contractual matters. Please call immediately. The fifth was from Ethan himself, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. Rachel, there seems to be some confusion about license transfers. Call me back, now. The 12th was from someone who identified himself as Cardinal Health's Chief Procurement Officer. Ms. Morgan, we're trying to understand the situation with Helixson's federal certifications. Our systems show you as the license holder. Please contact us urgently. But it was message number 17 that made me smile. Gregory Hale, CEO of Helixson Dynamics, calling from his vacation home in Florida. Rachel, I'm just learning about this situation. I need you to call me immediately. Whatever happened between you and Ethan, we can work it out. The company needs you. Needs, present tense, not needed, needs. I deleted all the messages and went back to my coffee. 11:47. The Wall Street Journal posted a brief article. Helixson Dynamics faces potential FDA compliance crisis. Their stock price dropped 12% in 15 minutes. I did the math. Roughly $1.2 billion in market cap. Evaporated. 12:30. I decided to check my email. 237 new messages. I scrolled through, reading subject lines. Urgent. License renewal authorization required. Emergency compliance meeting. Your attendance mandatory. Where are you? Legal notice regarding Section 12B. That last one caught my attention. From Helixson's general counsel, threatening legal action if I didn't immediately renew the licenses. I forwarded it to my lawyer with a simple note. They finally read the contract. 2:15. Local news picked up the story. Denver biotech giant faces federal investigation over lapsed certifications. They'd sent a news van to Helixson's headquarters. Through the live feed, I could see employees evacuating the building. Standard protocol when the FDA shows up for an unscheduled inspection. 3:20. Another call from Gregory Hale. This time I answered. Rachel. His voice was hoarse, exhausted. I just flew back from Florida. I've seen the contracts, the licenses, everything. This is a disaster. Hello, Gregory. How was your vacation? Rachel, please. I know what Ethan did. I saw the security footage of him destroying your promotion letter. I know about the warehouse reassignment. It was wrong. All of it. Yes, I agreed. It was... What do you want? Your job back? The promotion? Name it. I want you to understand something. Gregory, every quarter for 12 years, I sent you reports about the critical nature of compliance infrastructure. Every budget meeting, I requested additional staff to create redundancy in license management. Every time, I was told we couldn't afford it. That one person was enough. Silence on the other end. Well, I continued, you were right. One person was enough. As long as that person was appreciated, respected, and properly compensated, Ethan thought he could humiliate me into quitting quietly. Save the severance, avoid the unemployment claims. Very efficient. Rachel, check your email. Gregory, I just sent you my consulting terms. 6-month contract, triple my previous salary, plus a completion bonus. Oh, and Ethan's resignation letter needs to be on my desk before I'll even consider starting. That's extortion. No, Gregory, extortion would be if I threatened to let your licenses expire. I'm not threatening anything. They already expired. I'm offering to help you fix a problem your CFO created. That's consulting. I hung up and went back to watching the news. The reporter was interviewing confused Helixson employees in the parking lot. One of them was Tyler from Stanford, looking significantly less enthusiastic about disruption than he had 3 weeks ago. 4:45, my lawyer called. They've agreed to your terms, all of them. Ethan's already cleaning out his office. Make sure they know I don't start until Monday. They can sweat through another week of federal investigations. Rachel, you realize you just cost them $74 million? No, I corrected. Ethan cost them $74 million when he decided expertise was obsolete. I'm just the bill coming due. I poured another glass of wine and raised it to my reflection in the laptop screen. Tomorrow, Ethan Cole would be just another unemployed executive with a catastrophic failure on his resume. But tonight was for savoring the lesson he'd learned. Never tear up the promotion letter of someone who holds your company's life in her hands. Some signatures are worth more than others. Mine were worth exactly $74 million. The unraveling of Helixson dynamics happened with the precise brutality of a controlled demolition. From my living room command center, I watched each support beam buckle, each floor collapse into the next. By Tuesday morning, what started as a compliance issue had metastasized into a full-blown corporate crisis. 9:15 Tuesday. The first federal notice arrived. Not just FDA, DEA had joined the party. Turns out, when your controlled substance licenses expire, every opioid-based pain management chip in your inventory becomes technically illegal to possess. That's $22 million of product, now evidence in a potential federal crime. 9:32. CNBC picked up the story. Helixson Dynamics trading halted pending federal investigation. I watched the ticker symbol freeze, that beautiful red number locked at -37%. Somewhere, pension funds were hemorrhaging, retirement accounts were evaporating, all because one man thought efficiency meant destroying the people who kept the lights on. 10:10. The vendor exodus began. I still had access to the procurement portal. Ethan's IT efficiency hadn't thought to revoke credentials for terminated employees. Cardinal Health was first. Their $74 million purchase order officially canceled. Then Mercy General's hospital network. Then Blue Shield. One by one. Like rats fleeing a sinking ship. Except these rats took hundreds of millions in revenue with them. 10:35. My phone rang. Janet again. Rachel, they're interrogating everyone who worked in compliance. The FBI is here. FBI? That was unexpected. Delightful. But unexpected. Something about interstate commerce violations. They're seizing servers. I heard someone mention potential criminal charges for operating without federal authorization. I muted myself before laughing. When you ship medical devices across state lines without proper certification, it becomes a federal crime. Every unit Helixson had shipped since Sunday night was evidence. Ethan hadn't just cost them money, he'd potentially bought them criminal prosecution. 11:47. Gregory Hale called again. I didn't answer, but I did listen to his voicemail. Rachel, the board has accepted Ethan's resignation. He's been escorted from the building. Please, we need those licenses renewed immediately. The FBI is threatening to arrest our entire C-suite. Tuesday afternoon through Wednesday became a blur of schadenfreude. News vans multiplied outside Helixson's headquarters like bacteria in a petri dish. Former employees gave anonymous interviews about the toxic restructuring. Business journals ran think pieces on the $74 million ego, how one executive's hubris destroyed a biotech giant. Thursday morning at 6 a.m., I finally checked my email again. 843 messages, congressional subpoenas, class action lawsuits from shareholders, desperate pleas from former colleagues, and buried among them, one from Ethan Cole's personal Gmail. Rachel, I know you won't respond, but I need you to know I'm sorry. I was wrong. I thought I understood how companies worked, but I was just a child playing with matches in a gunpowder factory. My wife left me. My reputation is destroyed. No firm will touch me. I'm 31 years old, and my career is over. You won. Congratulations. I read it twice, waiting to feel sympathy. Nothing came. He'd learned the price of humiliation, just from a different teacher than he'd expected. Thursday, 2:15 p.m. The final domino. The Washington Post published an investigative piece. How a single signature toppled a $9 billion company. They'd done their homework, tracking down former employees, analyzing the compliance structure, even getting quotes from federal regulators who called it the most preventable corporate disaster in modern history. My favorite quote came from an unnamed FDA official. We see companies play fast and loose with compliance all the time, but this was like watching someone set fire to their own house because they didn't like the color of the paint. Friday morning, I walked back into Helixson Dynamics for the first time in a week. The building felt hollow, traumatized. Security guards who'd once ignored me now opened doors like I was visiting royalty. The marble lobby that had gleamed with corporate pride looked more like a mausoleum. Gregory Hale met me personally at the elevator. He'd aged 5 years in 5 days. Rachel, thank God you're here. My contract? I asked. Signed. Everything you asked for. The board approved it unanimously. He handed me a folder, thick with legal documents and bonus authorizations. Ethan's office, your office, is ready. I don't want his office, I said. I'll work from the compliance department, my old space. But that's on the 4th floor, with no windows. Exactly. That's where the real work happens. You might want to remember that. We rode the elevator in silence. As we passed the executive floor, I saw the aftermath of Ethan's reign: empty offices, dark conference rooms, the Innovation Hub sign already removed. 3 weeks of disruption, undone in 3 days. Rachel, Gregory said as I stepped off at the 4th floor, how long will it take to fix this? I looked at him, really looked at him. This man who'd let Ethan destroy careers because the quarterly reports looked good, who'd signed off on efficiency without understanding what he was sacrificing. The licenses? 48 hours? I've already started the renewal process. Your reputation? Your vendor relationships? Your stock price? Your employees' trust? I shrugged. Some things can't be fixed, Gregory. They can only be rebuilt, and that takes years. The compliance department was exactly as I'd left it, minus the boxes and humiliation. Janet had placed a single champagne bottle on my desk with a note. To the woman who holds the keys to the kingdom. I sat in my old chair, logged into the federal databases, and began the methodical process of resurrecting Helixson Dynamics. 47 licenses, 47 signatures, each one worth approximately $1.5 million in lost revenue per day. As I worked, I thought about Ethan Cole's email. You won, he'd written, but that was wrong. This wasn't about winning. This was about reminding corporate America that efficiency without expertise is just another word for disaster, that the people you step on while climbing the ladder might be the ones holding it steady. By 5 p.m., I'd renewed half the licenses. Helixson would survive. Wounded but breathing, they'd lost their largest client, most of their market cap, and all of their industry reputation. But they'd learned something valuable: the true cost of treating experience like overhead. I locked my office, my actual office, not some warehouse exile, and headed home. This time, I bought an entire bottle of champagne. Good champagne. Victory champagne. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying your enemies, it's letting them destroy themselves, then charging them triple to clean up the mess. The boardroom had been renamed back to just the boardroom. No more Innovation Hub, no more agile workspace, just 12 leather chairs around a mahogany table that had witnessed Helixson's rise and near fall. I sat at one end, Gregory Hale at the other, with the entire board of directors filling the space between us like a jury deliberating their own fate. It was Monday, 3 weeks after the collapse. I'd renewed all 47 licenses, navigated the FBI investigation, and even managed to convince 2 mid-tier clients to reconsider their cancellations. But Cardinal Health and their $74 million were gone forever, along with 60% of our market valuation. "The preliminary report is ready," Gregory announced, sliding bound copies across the table. "Rachel has documented the full scope of the incident." I watched them read, these titans of industry discovering how close they'd come to total annihilation. Page after page of regulatory violations, each one time-stamped to Ethan's tenure. The warehouse safety shortcuts I documented, the attempt to eliminate redundant quality controls, the plan to outsource federal reporting to an AI system that didn't understand the difference between FDA and USDA. "Jesus Christ," muttered Harrison Wright, our longest-serving board member. He wanted to use ChatGPT for federal compliance? "Page 47, I said. "You'll find his email proposing exactly that. He calculated it would save us $80,000 annually in salary costs." "And cost us how much in fines?" "Conservative estimate? $400 million? That's assuming no criminal charges," which was far from guaranteed. The room fell silent. These were people who measured success in stock prices and quarterly earnings, suddenly confronted with how little they understood about what kept their company legal. Gregory cleared his throat. "Rachel has agreed to stay on as Chief Compliance Officer for 6 months. The board needs to decide on a permanent solution." "I have a proposal," said Linda Patterson, head of the Compensation Committee. "Make Rachel's position permanent, with a seat on the executive committee and veto power over any operational changes affecting compliance." "That's unprecedented," another board member protested. "No non-C-suite position has ever had veto power." I leaned forward. "Gentlemen, ladies, let me be crystal clear. Ethan Cole happened because this board valued efficiency over expertise. You let a 31-year-old boy with a spreadsheet addiction gut your institutional knowledge because he promised to make the numbers dance, and it worked, right up until it didn't." "What are you suggesting?" Gregory asked, though he already knew. "I'm suggesting that compliance isn't a cost center to be optimized. It's the foundation that keeps you out of federal prison. You want me to stay? Fine, but I report directly to the board, not to whatever CEO you hire next. I have final say over any changes affecting regulatory adherence, and my department gets the budget it actually needs, not what some consultant thinks it deserves." They exchanged glances, these masters of negotiation realizing they had no leverage. I held their corporate life in my hands, and everyone knew it. "There's one more thing," I added. "Ethan Cole." "He's gone," Gregory said quickly. "Resigned in disgrace. He'll never work in biotech again." "I know. I've been getting calls from recruiters asking about him. Apparently, word travels fast when you cost a company $1 billion in market cap." I pulled out my phone, showing them an email. "This morning, he applied for a position at MedTech Solutions as a junior compliance analyst." The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The man who'd tried to eliminate compliance was now desperately trying to learn it. "He listed me as a reference," I continued. "What should I tell them?" The board shifted uncomfortably. They expected vengeance, the final twist of the knife. "Tell them the truth," I said. "That Ethan Cole is brilliant at identifying inefficiencies, that he works 18-hour days and genuinely believes in optimization, that he's one of the most driven individuals I've ever met." I paused. "And that he's also living proof of what happens when ambition operates without wisdom. Let MedTech Solutions decide if that's a risk worth taking." Linda Patterson smiled. "That's unexpectedly generous." "It's not generosity, it's justice. He'll spend the rest of his career in entry-level positions, knowing exactly how far he could have risen if he'd just respected the people who knew better. That's a more fitting punishment than unemployment." The vote was unanimous. I became Helixson's first chief compliance officer with board-level authority, a salary that would make Ethan weep, and the guarantee that no future CEO could touch my department without my explicit approval. As the board filed out, Gregory lingered. Rachel, I need to ask, when you activated Section 12B, when you let those licenses expire, did you know it would go this far? I gathered my papers, thinking about those 48 hours when I'd held Helixson's fate in my hands. The truth was, I'd known exactly what would happen. Every domino, every collapse, every federal agent who would walk through our doors. 12 years of experience had taught me that compliance wasn't just about following rules. It was about understanding consequences. Gregory, I said, when someone tears up your promotion letter in front of your peers, when they exile you to a warehouse, when they call your life's work legacy overhead, they're sending a message. They're saying your expertise has no value. And you sent a message back. No, I let the federal government send the message. I just provided them with the address. I left him standing there, contemplating the rubble of Ethan's efficient new world. Outside my office, my real office, with its lack of windows and abundance of federal regulations, Janet waited with a bottle of champagne. Celebrating? She asked. Remembering, I corrected. Ethan thought power was about moving people around an org chart, but real power is understanding that some people can't be moved. They can only be destroyed, and sometimes destroying them destroys everything else too. We drank champagne from coffee mugs, there in the unglamorous fourth floor of a building that had nearly collapsed from the top down. Tomorrow, I'd go back to the mundane work of keeping a $9 billion company on the right side of federal law. But tonight, I savored the truth that every executive should understand. The person you humiliate on Monday might be the only one who can save you on Friday, and by then, their price will have gone up considerably. 6 months later, I stood in the same boardroom where Ethan had once presented his vision of an optimized Helixson, but this time, I wasn't fighting for survival. I was presenting our comeback story. Federal compliance rating, 100% for 2 consecutive quarters, I announced, clicking through slides that showed green check marks instead of red warnings. Client confidence index up 43%, and yes, we've recovered 30% of our lost market cap. The board members who'd once viewed compliance as overhead now hung on every word. They'd learned their lesson in the most expensive classroom imaginable, the free market. Any word from Cardinal Health? Gregory asked, hope creeping into his voice. They've agreed to a meeting next month, no promises. But they're willing to listen. I paused. Their new procurement officer mentioned she was impressed by our renewed commitment to regulatory excellence. What I didn't mention was that their new procurement officer was Sarah Martinez, who'd left Helixson during Ethan's purge and remembered exactly who'd kept the company afloat for 12 years. Sometimes the best revenge is served by people you've never even met. After the meeting, I returned to my office, still on the 4th floor, still without windows, now with a nameplate that read Chief Compliance Officer and a salary that made it all worthwhile. Janet knocked and entered with a package. "This just arrived for you," she said, placing it on my desk with a knowing smile. Inside was a single piece of paper and a handwritten note. The paper was my torn promotion letter, meticulously taped back together like a jigsaw puzzle. The note was brief. "Rachel, I found these pieces in a drawer when they cleaned out the old boardroom. Thought you might want them. Congratulations on everything. You earned it. A friend who learned too late." No signature, but I recognized the handwriting. Ethan Cole, reaching out from his new life as a junior compliance analyst 70 miles away. I'd heard through the grapevine that he was doing well, studying nights, working weekends, slowly climbing the ladder he'd once tried to burn. I looked at the reconstructed letter. This artifact of corporate humiliation transformed into something else entirely. A reminder, a warning, a trophy. Janet peered over my shoulder. "Are you going to frame it?" "No," I said, carefully folding it and placing it in my desk drawer. Some things are more powerful when they're hidden, like shadow admin access, like Section 12B, like the knowledge that keeps companies alive. That evening, I met Marcus from legal for drinks. He'd survived the purge and now ran a team twice the size of Ethan's entire optimization budget. "You know what the real irony is?" he said, raising his beer. "Ethan was right about one thing. Helixon did need disruption, just not the kind he was selling." "Oh?" "We were complacent, comfortable, taking people like you for granted. His disaster forced us to recognize what actually keeps this place running." He clinked his glass against mine. "To the most expensive lesson in corporate history." "To expensive lessons," I agreed, "and the people who teach them." As I drove home that night, I passed by the warehouse where I'd spent 2 weeks in exile. The building looked the same, but I saw it differently now, not as a place of humiliation, but as a strategic position, the bunker where I'd planned my campaign. My phone buzzed with a LinkedIn notification, another message from a recruiter. The 5th this week. News of my single-handed rescue of Helixon had made me something of a legend in compliance circles. The offers were flattering, some double my current salary, but I wasn't interested. You see, Helixon had learned its lesson, but corporate America hadn't. Somewhere out there, another Ethan Cole was preparing to optimize away another company's foundation. Another CEO was about to discover that PowerPoints couldn't replace expertise. Another board was about to learn that efficiency without understanding was just destruction with better branding. And maybe, if they were very unlucky, they'd learn it from someone like me. Someone who understood that true power wasn't about climbing the corporate ladder. It was about knowing which rungs keep the whole thing standing. I pulled into my driveway, where my husband waited with takeout from our favorite restaurant. "How was your day?" he asked, the same question he'd posed for 12 years. "Educational," I replied, the same answer I'd given the night Ethan tore up my promotion. "Very educational." Inside, I poured 2 glasses of wine, not the champagne of victory or the Merlot of revenge, just a simple Pinot Grigio for a Monday evening. We toasted to ordinary things, to Tuesday morning meetings, to federal databases that never sleep, to the quiet competence that keeps the world turning. Because that's the final lesson in this story of corporate karma. Power isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet click of a keyboard at 4:30 on a Friday afternoon, entering a single line of code that brings an empire to its knees. Sometimes it's knowing when to hold your cards and when to show them. And sometimes, just sometimes, it's watching a 31-year-old executive learn that the person he stepped on to reach the top was the only one who knew how to work the elevator. The newspapers called it the $74 million mistake. Business schools would eventually teach it as a case study in hubris, but for me, it would always be something simpler. Proof that in the end, competence conquers all. Even if it takes a few signatures to prove it. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If you enjoyed this tale of corporate karma, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. Have you ever witnessed or experienced something similar in your workplace? I'd be fascinated to hear your stories.